Make the obese girl cry for $100. Drunk men's cruel bet, mountain man's unexpected move. Make the obese girl cry for $100. The words cut through the smoke-hazed air of the Golden Nugget Saloon, sharp enough to slice through the piano music and the roar of miners' laughter. For a heartbeat, everything paused. The clink of glasses, the shuffle of cards, the creak of boots on warped floorboards. Then the noise swelled back, uglier than before. Iris Blackwood didn't look up. She sat in her usual corner by the office door, ledger open, fountain pen scratching steady lines of ink across the page. 28 years old, nearly 195 kilograms. She filled the sturdy chair her father had reinforced for her, corset protesting quietly beneath her dark green dress. Years of practice had taught her how to keep her face calm even when her heart lurched, how to make herself small in a town that never stopped reminding her how big she was. At the bar, Jack Turner, already more whiskey than man, threw an arm around his friend Cassidy's shoulders and crowed, "You heard him, boys. $100 says somebody can get the fat girl to bawl. Real tears, mind you, none of that misty-eyed business." A chorus of hoots and jeers answered him. Gold glinted on the bar as Cassidy spilled coins from a leather pouch, the pile catching firelight like something unholy. Samuel Blackwood, polishing a glass behind the bar, went rigid. "That's enough," he snapped. "You keep my daughter out of your games." "Aw, come on, Sam," Cassidy drawled, his words slurring at the edges. "She's part of the scenery. Big as the piano, twice as sturdy. We've all wondered if she can even feel anything under all that." The men laughed. Iris kept her eyes on the ledger, hand steady, vision blurring just a little as the column swam. She inhaled once, slow and deep. Do not react. Do not give them what they want. A lanky cowhand swaggered away from the bar, spurs jangling. "I'll take that bet," he said, tugging at his dusty vest. "Watch this, boys. I'll have her sobbing before the next song's done." He stopped at Iris's table, close enough that she could smell the sour whiskey on his breath. "Hey there, Blackwood," he sneered. "You know the floor groans every time you walk across it. Heard a fella say the town's sinking on the side you sleep on." Laughter fanned out behind him. Iris let her pen hover, then calmly wrote the next figure. Her pulse hammered in her ears, but her expression didn't crack. "Nothing?" the cowhand scoffed. "Maybe you didn't hear me over your stomach growling. Tell me, how many pies does it take to keep a girl like you from starving? 10 a day? 20? Her throat burned, but she only murmured, "Your tab is overdue by $6.75. If you don't pay it by Monday, you'll be drinking water for a month." A fresh burst of laughter, this time at him. His ears went red. "You think you're clever," he snapped. "You're just a joke everybody's too polite to say out loud. You know why you're always behind that ledger, sweetheart? Because nobody wants to see you on their arm. Even your papa can't give you away." The words struck home like thrown stones. Iris felt each one, sharp and true. Still, she did not look up. A single tear would mean victory, and she would not give redemption that. At the bar, Cassidy slapped his palm on the wood. "Better, but still no tears. Next." Men tried, one after another. Their insults grew cruder, more vicious, circling her weight, her loneliness, her supposed worth. They speculated loudly about what kind of man would be desperate enough to touch her. Someone joked that if you tipped her over, she'd roll all the way to the Bitterroot Range. Inside, Iris felt herself shatter into 100 sharp pieces. Outside, her hand never stopped moving, columns of ink marching on as if they weren't recording her own public humiliation. When they turned their words on her father, calling him a fool for not paying a man to take his elephant off his hands, something inside her finally flinched. Her chair scraped back as she rose, ledger closing with a soft thud. The saloon went strangely quiet. "You can stop now," she said, voice rough but steady. "You've made your point. I understand exactly what you all think of me." She looked at her father, and the pain in her eyes was worse than any insult. "I'm sorry, Papa. I never meant to drag you down with me." She turned toward the back door, the crowd parting just enough to let her pass, every step a battle to keep her head high. Behind her, Cassidy called, "Where you going, Blackwood? Down to the creek to practice drowning. Might take a while before you sink." Laughter, sharp and cruel, exploded again, and that was when a chair scraped in the darkest corner of the room. A man rose from the shadows, a giant of a figure, shoulders broad enough to block the lamplight, beard tangled, coat worn from long winters. He'd been there all along, silent over his whiskey, watching. Now, as he stood to his full height, the noise drained from the golden nugget like water from a cracked barrel. Someone near the door swallowed hard. "Lord above," he whispered, "it's him, the mountain man from the Bitterroots." Before we follow what this silent stranger does next, tell me in the comments where in the world you're listening from right now. Are you hearing this story from a big city, a tiny town, or somewhere out in the countryside? In Redemption, people told 3 kinds of stories. The first were mining tales, of veins of silver so rich a man could retire after one good strike. Those were mostly lies. The second were ghost stories, whispered on cold nights about men who'd gone into the Bitterroot Mountains and never come back. The third were about Iris Blackwood. They never said her name kindly. She was born in the back room of a boarding house during a snowstorm so fierce the town still talked about it. By 6, she'd lost her mother to consumption. By 12, she'd outgrown dresses meant for grown women. By 16, she'd learned to move through redemption with her eyes down and her jaw clenched, pretending not to hear the laughter that followed her like a stray dog. Her father, Samuel, did what he could. He gave her work when the saloon opened, first washing glasses, then keeping the books when he realized numbers calmed her. He paid extra for a reinforced chair after the first one groaned and snapped under her weight, and when the carpenter muttered something about a whole tree sitting on a twig, Samuel threw him out and found another man. But he couldn't stop the stares. He couldn't stop the snickers when she passed. He couldn't stop cowhands from elbowing one another and whispering, "There goes the fattest girl in Montana territory." Iris learned to armor herself in silence. She wore dark colors because they drew less comment. She braided her hair tight and pinned it at the nape of her neck because loose waves drew attention. She sat in her corner with the ledger book and pretended the saloon was just numbers on a page. Profits, losses, inventory, wages, and not a room full of people dissecting her existence every time she shifted in her chair. Tonight was worse than usual. Cassidy's pile of gold on the bar seemed to glow brighter than the lamps, and the words, "Make the obese girl cry," had turned her into a target so obvious even the dullest drunk could see it. Men who scarcely knew her name suddenly saw a way to turn her pain into money. They lined up for the privilege. One compared her to a hog fattened for slaughter. Another described in grotesque detail how the floor would give way under her one day and they'd find her in the cellar, still wedged in the hole. A third offered, to raucous laughter, to marry her on the spot, for the $100 and a railway ticket back east, so I won't have to look at her again. Each insult was a blow. Each laugh was a boot, grinding it in. Iris wrote down that the Golden Nugget had sold 12 bottles of whiskey and 3 of rye in the last hour. Her pen didn't shake. Only her hand did. At the bar, a couple of men tried half-heartedly to get Cassidy to stop. "Come on, you made your point," one said. "She's Sam's girl. Leave off." But Cassidy was in blood now, drunk on attention and cruelty. "She's not a girl," he scoffed. "She's a spectacle. Big difference." Samuel's patience finally snapped when Cassidy dragged his name into it, shouting across the room about how he'd have to pay a man to take Iris off his hands. The old man came around the bar, rag still in one fist, jaw clenched. He looked ready to swing it like a cudgel. "You apologized to my daughter," he said hoarsely. "Right now." Cassidy laughed in his face. "Or what, Sam? You'll charge me extra for drinks? The whole town knows you'd sell your soul to see that girl married. You should be thanking me for pointing out the truth. She's a burden, a walking reminder you failed to give your wife a proper send-off." The room drew in a collective sharp breath. That was a line no one crossed, mentioning Samuel's dead wife. Even drunks shifted, uneasy. Iris stood. The dull scrape of her chair legs against the floorboards sounded louder than the piano, louder than the storm of voices. Men turned. Cards hung suspended above tables. For the first time all evening, she let them see her. Really see her. Her cheeks were pale, not flushed. Her eyes were dry, though they burned. Her hands shook just enough to make the ink on her fingers blur. "You can stop now," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the saloon all the same. "I understand. You have made it perfectly clear what this town thinks of me." "Iris." Samuel reached toward her. She looked at him, and the apology in her eyes nearly knocked him back a step. "I'm sorry, Papa. I never wanted to make your life harder. I never wanted you to be ashamed when people looked at me and saw this." Her hand flicked briefly toward her own body, the gesture small but devastating. Samuel's throat worked. "I'm not ashamed of you." "Maybe not in your heart," she said softly. "But every time they talk like this and you can't stop them, I see what it costs you." A painful silence followed. For once, no one laughed. No one found a joke. Even Cassidy shifted, as if her words pricked some buried shard of conscience. Iris straightened her shoulders. "I won't cry for you," she told the room. "Not for $100, not for 1,000. My tears are worth more than your gold." Then she turned and walked away, each step steady, each movement measured. She passed the tables, ignoring the way men shrank from her path as if they might catch something. At the back door, she paused just long enough to breathe once, then slipped out into the cool spring night. For a moment, the saloon was utterly still. Then Cassidy tried to recover his momentum. "Well," he said loudly, forcing a chuckle, "there goes our entertainment. Maybe she'll do us all a kindness and jump in the creek. Water might finally find its level." The joke landed badly. Even Turner winced, and in the darkest corner of the room a chair scraped. The man who rose from it had been there since early evening, sitting alone with a bottle of whiskey he barely touched. Most had written him off as another miner down from the hills, if they noticed him at all. Now, as he straightened to his full height, heads turned, conversations dying mid-sentence, he was enormous. Not fat like Iris, but built on a scale that made other men look unfinished. 6'8", maybe 6'9", with arms like cut timber and a chest that strained the seams of his worn coat. His hair and beard were dark, streaked with early gray, giving him the look of a man who'd seen too many winters. Scars traced pale lines along his knuckles and jaw. He didn't sway like a drunk. He moved like a man who knew exactly where his body was in space and what it could do. Cassidy, still half laughing, turned, and his grin faltered. "What are you—" The stranger crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides, grabbed Cassidy by the throat, and lifted him clean off the floor. The miner's boots kicked uselessly in the air. The room erupted in shouts. Cards scattered. Hands flew to gun belts, but nobody drew. Not yet. "Finish that sentence," the big man said quietly, his voice as rough as gravel sliding down a mountainside, "and I'll snap your neck before you hit the ground." Turner whispered, half in awe, half in fear, "Sweet Lord, it's the beast." The name shivered through the crowd. Stories about the beast of the Bitterroots had been traded around campfires for years. A mountain man who lived higher than sane men dared go, who'd survived a grizzly's claws, who'd killed more than one outlaw with his bare hands. Most men thought he was a legend. Legend, it turned out, had walked through their door and ordered a whiskey and silence 3 hours ago. The beast, Tobias Grimshaw, to the few who knew him by name, let Cassidy drop, sending him sprawling across the sawdust. Then he turned slowly, sweeping the room with eyes the color of storm clouds over snow. "I've listened to enough," he said, "enough to turn a man's stomach." No one spoke. "That woman sat here working while you tore strips off her for sport," Tobias went on. "She never raised her voice, never begged, never gave you the show you wanted. She showed more courage than I've seen from most men in a firefight, and you called it weakness." He reached into his coat, pulled out a leather pouch, and tossed it onto the bar. Gold clinked solid and heavy. "There's your $100, and 400 more. That's 500 in all. Here's how this works now. Every man who took a shot at her tonight is going to put 1 week's wages in that pile. It goes to Miss Blackwood as apology." His gaze swept them again. "If you'd rather keep your money, you can step outside with me instead." Chairs creaked. No one moved. "Didn't think so," Tobias said. "Now," he looked at Samuel. "Where did she go?" Samuel swallowed hard. "Down to the creek," he said hoarsely. "She always goes there when it's bad." Tobias nodded once. Without another word, he turned and headed for the back door, leaving the golden nugget silent behind him. Outside, the spring night was cool and clear, the stars sharp above the dark shapes of the Bitterroot Mountains. Tobias followed the faint path behind the saloon, listening for the soft rush of water and the quieter sound of a woman trying very hard not to cry. He found her on a flat rock by the creek, arms wrapped around herself, dress glowing pale in the moonlight. "Iris Blackwood?" he called gently, stopping a few paces away so as not to startle her. "My name is Tobias Grimshaw. I think it's past time someone stood on your side." Tobias Grimshaw did not sit beside her at first. He approached with the caution of a man who understood pain the way other men understood card games or rifle stocks, intimately, instinctively, as something that lived in the bones. "I won't come closer unless you ask," he said, stopping a respectful distance away. "You've had enough men crowding you tonight." Iris kept her gaze on the creek, watching the moon ripple in the water. Her voice was barely audible when she answered, "You can sit, just not too near." Tobias lowered himself onto a boulder across from her with surprising gentleness for such a large man. The creek hissed softly between them, cold and steady. For a long moment, neither spoke. "You're not crying," Tobias said finally, not as an observation but as something closer to sorrow. "I don't cry," Iris replied, "not where anyone can see." "That's not strength," Tobias said quietly. "That's survival." The truth of it hit her harder than any insult. Iris wrapped her arms tighter around herself, feeling suddenly transparent in front of a stranger she barely knew. "Why did you step in?" she asked, eyes still fixed forward. "You don't know me." "No," Tobias said. "But cruelty is familiar. Too familiar. And I can't abide men who hunt the wounded for sport." The night breeze tugged at her braid. Iris swallowed hard. "I wasn't wounded. I was pathetic. Sitting there letting them—" "You let them nothing," Tobias cut in, firm but calm. "If a wolf pack circles you, you keep still. Doesn't mean you deserve the teeth." She blinked, startled. "You talk like someone who's seen wolves." "I've been one," he answered softly. That made her look at him, and for the first time she didn't see the looming legend whispered about in mining camps. She saw a man with a haunted stillness in his eyes, scars that told stories he would never speak aloud, and a heaviness in his shoulders that came from loss deeper than the forest shadows behind him. "Tobias," she said quietly, trying the name. "Why did you really come out here? You could have just scared them and gone back to your corner." He hesitated. Then he exhaled a breath that looked like surrender in the moonlight. "7 years ago, I had a daughter," he said. "Hannah, sweetest soul you'd ever meet. And she carried her weight the way you do, carried it on her body, carried it in every room she walked into, carried it in her heart." Iris's breath caught. She tried to hide how much the teasing hurt her, how much the world pushed her into corners and shadows. Tobias's voice thickened. "I thought she was strong enough to bear it. I thought she'd grow past it. I was wrong." He looked toward the creek as though seeing another world entirely. "I found her hanging in our barn, 13 years old." Iris's hand flew to her mouth. "Tobias," he continued, voice gruff but steady. "She left a note. Said she was tired of being laughed at, tired of feeling like she took up too much space, tired of being a burden." A tear slipped down Iris's cheek before she could stop it. "When I heard those men tonight," Tobias said, "I heard the voices that chased my girl into the dark. And I swore over her grave that if I ever saw cruelty like that again, I would not stand silent." Iris wiped her cheeks fiercely. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for Hannah and for you." Tobias inclined his head. "I can't save her, but maybe I can stop someone else from being crushed before they break." Silence settled again, deep, heavy, but not suffocating. Tobias's words lingered in the cold air, raw and unvarnished. Iris found herself breathing differently, slower, as if her heartbeat was finally allowed to soften. "What are you going to do now?" she asked. "Depends," Tobias said. "What are you going to do?" Iris stared at her reflection in the creek, round face, red eyes, shoulders hunched from years of trying to shrink herself into something tolerable. "I don't know. Stay here, I suppose. Go back to the ledger. Pretend tonight never happened." You and I both know it will happen again, Tobias said gently. Maybe not tomorrow, but soon. Men like that don't change. No, she murmured, they don't. Tobias shifted on the boulder, leaning forward slightly. There is another option? She frowned. What kind of option? Come with me. Her breath tangled. Come with you. Where? To the mountains, Tobias said simply. To my homestead, far from this town, far from men who mistake cruelty for strength. Her heart slammed once hard. That's impossible. Why? Tobias asked. You're grown. You make your own choices. She shook her head. People would talk. They already talk, he said. Difference is, in the mountains, you won't hear them. I'd be a burden. You wouldn't. You don't know what you're offering. I know exactly. Tobias. He lifted a hand, not to touch her, just to pause her objection. I am not asking you to be my wife, or my companion, or anything beyond a guest. I have a cabin with 2 rooms. You would have your own space, your own door, your own lock. I won't touch you. I won't expect anything from you. But you'd have peace. You'd have quiet. You'd have a chance to remember who you are without the whole damn town telling you. Iris felt her pulse in her throat. Why would you do that for me? Because I couldn't save my daughter, Tobias said, but I can save someone else's. The words shattered something inside her gently, like breaking a shell to let light in. She drew a shaky breath. I need to tell my father. I need him to understand. Tobias nodded once. Then let's go. And whatever he decides, whatever you decide, I'll accept it. He rose and offered his hand, not demanding, not insistent, simply steady. For a long moment, Iris stared at that hand, rough, scarred, strong enough to lift her if she stumbled, gentle enough to hold her hurt without crushing it. She placed her hand in his and let him lead her back toward the life she was about to leave behind. The climb into the Bitterroots changed Iris long before the mountains themselves came into view. Tobias kept the pace gentle as they rode, stopping whenever she needed a rest, never commenting on her breathlessness or the strain in her thighs. On the second day, when her mare stumbled on a rocky incline and Iris's weight pitched dangerously, Tobias caught both woman and horse with a speed and steadiness that unsettled her in ways she could not name. You all right? He asked quietly. Yes, she answered, startled by how much she meant it. Yes. By the time the homestead appeared, a valley cupped between 2 ridges, with a stream threading through like a silver ribbon, Iris could barely keep her eyes open. Nights on the trail had been cold, unfamiliar, and filled with sounds she didn't know how to name. But exhaustion gave way to awe when Tobias gestured toward the clearing. This is home. The cabin stood solid and square, its roof freshly patched, its windows trimmed with homemade shutters. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney. Chickens clucked near the coop. A small barn stood beyond it. Everything was orderly, practical, and undeniably lived in. But what froze Iris in place was the unexpected softness woven into the edges. Flowers planted near the steps, a hand-carved bench by the door, a wind chime made from polished river stones turning slowly in the breeze. You did all this? Iris asked. Tobias shrugged. A man needs things to do during long winters. Inside, the cabin washed her with warmth, literal and otherwise. The hearth blazed generously, its glow softening the rough log walls. A sturdy table stood near the fire, flanked by mismatched chairs clearly built by the same hands. Shelves lined one wall, stocked with jars, herbs, and folded linens. Everything smelled faintly of pine, smoke, and something like cedar oil. But nothing prepared her for the room he'd made for her. Tobias pushed open the door to the right of the fireplace. "This is yours." She stepped inside slowly. The room was larger than she expected, with a wide bed fitted with an impossibly thick quilt in shades of forest green and soft cream. A small wood stove sat in the corner, already warm. A dresser and wardrobe stood against the wall, polished and sturdy. A rug lay underfoot, woven, not purchased, its colors muted but warm. A desk with a chair sat beneath the window, where she could look down toward the stream. In every detail she saw intention. "You said you needed privacy," Tobias said almost awkwardly. "You'll have it. The door locks from the inside. The loft is mine. If I ever need to speak with you, I'll knock." Iris ran her fingers along the bed frame carved with intricate vines. "This must have taken you months." He hesitated. "I started it for my daughter, finished it for you." Her breath caught. She whispered, "Tobias." But he shook his head. "No need to say anything. This is your space, yours and no one else's." For the first time in years, Iris felt something loosen deep inside her. The tight knot she'd carried since girlhood, clenched against mockery, judgment, shame. Here, nothing mocked her. Nothing demanded she shrink. She was allowed to exist. Tobias set her up gently into the rhythm of mountain life. He never hovered, never rushed her, never treated her like a fragile thing. On the first morning, she found him outside splitting kindling. The sunrise hit his shoulders, and the bright ring of the axe on wood sent echoes through the valley. Iris lingered in the doorway, watching the fluid power in his movements. He caught her eye and paused. "You hungry?" A blush warmed her cheeks. "A little." "I made porridge," he said. "It's not much, but it'll keep you warm." He ladled hers first, a small thing maybe, but no one ever fed her first. While she ate, slowly, savoring the smooth warmth, Tobias showed her the workings of the homestead. He didn't assume her limitations. Instead, he watched and adapted. When she struggled to climb the steps to the barn, he slowed his stride. When she bent to gather eggs and lost her balance, he steadied her elbow without comment. When she reached for a heavy bucket, he gently nudged a lighter one her way. "Start with this," he said, not as an instruction, but as an offering. By the third day, she'd taken over breakfast entirely. "You don't need to cook for me," Tobias murmured after she served him eggs and bannock. "I want to," Iris answered simply. "It feels nice." His eyes softened. "Then I'm grateful." During the afternoons, he showed her how to mend small tears in clothing, how to check the garden for frost burn, how to gather firewood safely. He taught her to tie knots, strong ones, not pretty ones, and how to read the sky for weather. When her fingers fumbled, he was patient. When she surprised him with a skill she hadn't known she had, he smiled, small, rare, and warm. In the evenings after supper, they sat across from each other at the fire. She wrote letters to her father. Tobias carved wood, quietly, methodically. Sometimes he spoke, sometimes he didn't, but nothing in his silence was cold. Day by day, something shifted between them. It showed in small gestures. The way he poured the first cup of coffee for her, leaving the stronger one for himself. The way she set aside the softest part of the loaf for him. The way he stepped slightly slower when walking beside her. The way she hummed, softly, unconsciously, while cooking, and how his gaze softened every time the sound filled the cabin. One evening, after a week had passed, Iris sat beside the fire, darning a pair of Tobias's socks with clumsy stitches. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know," she replied, "but you've done so much for me." "You're not a debt," he murmured. "And you're not a punishment," she returned. His head jerked up, surprised. Then something settled in his expression, gentle and raw all at once. "Tobias," she said after a beat, "what did you think of me the first night, when you saw me?" He answered without hesitation, "I thought you were holding up the roof." Iris flinched. He leaned toward her, eyes steady. "Because the roof nearly caved with the weight of that cruelty. And you, alone, held it back. I'd never seen strength like that." Tears pricked her eyes, not from pain, but from something like healing. Life in the cabin grew easier after that. In the mornings, they shared quiet breakfasts. In the afternoons, they worked side by side. In the evenings, the fire crackled between them like a third presence, warm, patient, waiting. And without realizing it, Iris found herself smiling more often, sleeping deeper, breathing without flinching. She found, in the unlikeliest place, something she'd never had in all her 28 years: hope. Autumn in the Bitterroots carried a quiet that made Iris's bones soften each morning. Leaves turned gold on the aspens near the creek. The air sharpened, crisp enough that she could see her breath when she stepped outside to feed the chickens. She slept deeper now, waking without the heaviness of dread she once carried in redemption. But peace, Tobias often said, was the most fragile thing in the wilderness. One shout could break it, one hoofbeat, one memory. It began with the letters. Iris wrote her father every week, as she had promised. Tobias saddled a horse on the first Monday of each month to ride into town for salt, lamp oil, gunpowder, and mail. He never stayed more than a few hours. He hated crowds, hated eyes staring at the scars on his knuckles, hated whispers that began with the word beast. Iris tried not to worry when he was gone, but every ride took him past the shadows of the world she left behind, and she always held her breath until he returned. On the first day of November, when Tobias rode into view, she ran out to meet him, until she saw his face. He carried 2 letters, one sealed, one torn open, crumpled at the edges. "Iris," he said quietly, "we need to talk." Her heartbeat kicked hard. "Is Papa all right?" "Yes," Tobias said. "Your father is well. But this came from Sheriff Dalton." The bottom dropped out of her stomach. Why would the sheriff write to me? Tobias handed her the opened letter. Sheriff Dalton's handwriting was blunt, uneven, rushed. "Miss Blackwood, I reckon it's my duty to inform you that there's been talk in town. Cassidy and his boys been running their mouths since you left. Claim you ran off with a dangerous man. Some say they aim to come collect you. I don't know what's true, but trouble's brewing. Sam wants you safe. Be warned." Iris swallowed hard. "They're coming here?" "I don't know," Tobias said. "But Dalton doesn't take pen to paper lightly. If he says men are talking, they're planning." Iris's hands trembled. "Why? They humiliated me. They got their entertainment. Why bother with me now?" "Because some men can't stand being shamed," Tobias said quietly. "I embarrassed Cassidy in that saloon, made him look small. A man like that doesn't forget." Iris closed her eyes. The cabin had become her sanctuary, the first place in her entire life where she felt safe. And now the threat of that old world clawed its way back toward her. "This is my fault," she whispered. "No," Tobias said sharply. "Don't do that. Don't take blame for another man's sickness." "But if they come—" Iris looked around the cabin, the small garden, the neat stacks of firewood Tobias had chopped. "They'll ruin everything. They'll hurt you. They'll burn this place." Tobias stepped closer, but kept his hands at his sides, never touching without permission. "I'm not afraid of them." "You should be," she said. "They hate you as much as they hate me." "No," Tobias answered, voice low. "They fear me. Fear makes men stupid, but it also makes them predictable." Iris sank down onto the porch step. Tobias crouched beside her, his knees creaking. His presence steadied the air around her, heavy but grounding, like a hand pressed to her back in warning and comfort at once. "Iris," he said, softer this time, "there's more." He handed her the second letter, the unopened one. "It's from your father." She tore it open carefully. "My dearest girl, I don't want to alarm you, but Cassidy and 2 others have been stirring trouble. They blame you for Tobias humiliating them. They blame Tobias for shaming the whole saloon. I told them if they went after you, I'd bury them myself, but I'm an old man with one bad leg. I don't know what I can stop. I want you to stay safe up in the mountains. Don't come home. Don't let him bring you home. Shelter with Tobias. And trust him. He's a better man than this town deserves. I love you, Iris. I'm proud of you. Always. Papa." Her hand flew to her mouth, and for the first time since she was 6 years old, she let herself cry. Not from humiliation, but from the fierce, painful love in her father's words. Tobias let her cry. He said nothing. He didn't offer comfort or look away. He simply stayed close, letting her grief move through the cold air until it softened into silence. Finally, she drew a shaking breath. "They're coming. You know they are." "Yes," he said. "And you'll fight them." "Yes. And you could die." Tobias's gaze flicked toward the distant ridge where the sun was sinking behind the pines. "Maybe," he said, "but I won't let them touch you." Something inside her cracked, not fear, but something deeper. She looked at him fully, really seeing him. The scars, the strength, the loneliness, the fierce determination. She had suspected for weeks that Tobias Grimshaw carried wounds he never spoke aloud. Now she realized another truth. She wasn't the only one who had come to the mountains to heal. Later that night, when the lamps were dim and the fire hissed softly, she found him sitting at the table, oiling his rifle. The metal gleamed like winter moonlight. "Tobias," she murmured. He looked up. "Why did you really take me in?" He paused, cloth frozen mid-stroke. "I told you," he said. "I didn't save my daughter. I won't fail another." "That's not all," Iris said gently. "I know it now." Silence, a long one. Finally, Tobias set the cloth aside. He folded his big hands in front of him, knuckles pale. "I brought you here because I saw myself in you," he said. "Wounds carried quiet, shame stitched deep, strength no one recognized." He exhaled, slow and painful. "And because I was lonely in a way a man can't explain without sounding broken." Iris stepped closer. "You're not broken." He looked up then, really looked, and for the first time she saw fear in his eyes. Not of Cassidy, not of death, of her, of losing her. "You brought the light back into this place," he said quietly. "Into me. But I won't hold you prisoner here. If you want to go back to your father, I'll take you. If you want to leave this valley, I'll escort you to the next territory. If you want nothing more to do with me, I'll understand." Iris's throat tightened. "Tobias, I don't want to leave." His breath hitched. I don't want to run, she continued, voice trembling. I don't want to spend the rest of my life hiding from men like Cassidy. I want to live, I want to stand, and I want to do it here with you. His jaw clenched, emotion rippling across his usually immovable features. They stood like that for a long moment, the fire warm on their skin, the wind brushing against the windows, the night holding its breath. Then he said the words that shifted everything. I won't let them take you, not while I draw breath. And Iris believed him, not because he was the beast of the Bitterroots, but because Tobias Grimshaw had already done the one thing no other person had ever done for her. He saw her worth, and he chose her. Snow came early to the Bitterroots that year. By the second week of November, the valley outside the cabin lay under a thin white blanket that crackled when stepped on. The air held a warning edge, sharp as a whetted blade. Tobias felt it in his bones before the weather even shifted. Snow this early means trouble, he muttered as he split logs. Tracks stay visible, sound carries farther. Iris knew what he meant. Trouble could find them more easily. By the fourth morning, the birds had gone silent. Iris noticed it first. She paused while stirring oats over the fire, wooden spoon mid-air. Tobias, she whispered, do you hear that? He did. Nothing. No ravens, no chickadees, no soft flutter of wings, only stillness. He stepped to the window, jaw locking. They're close. Fear crawled cold up Iris's spine. She moved behind him instinctively. Tobias's hand found hers, briefly, firmly, before he stepped away. Take the pistol, he said softly. Stay behind the table. Don't move unless I tell you. Tobias. Iris. One word, not harsh. Steady. She nodded and went to the table, sliding the pistol into her palm. Her hand trembled, but her breath steadied. The quiet of the cabin held her like a cupped hand. Then came the first sound, a crunch of snow. Another. Voices, 3, 4, close, too close. A fist slammed against the cabin door. The wood jolted in its hinges. Tobias Grimshaw. Cassidy's voice, slurred but loud. You got something that belongs to us. Tobias's body shifted, weight balanced, eyes flat and calm. Cabin's private property. You've got 5 seconds to step off my land. Or what? Cassidy laughed, high and ugly. You'll kill us? Again? Heard you murdered a man in Idaho just for looking at you wrong? I killed a man for beating a Shoshone child, Tobias said. Open your mouth again, and I'll consider the same. Cassidy snarled. We came for the girl. You embarrassed us in front of the whole town. You humiliated me. She humiliated me. Iris's heart thudded painfully, but she kept silent. You hand her over, Cassidy shouted, or we burn that cabin around your ears. Tobias's voice turned cold enough to freeze the air. You take one more step toward this door, and I'll put you in the ground. There was a rustle outside, men shifting, perhaps reaching for weapons. Iris steadied the pistol. Her breath trembled. Her resolve did not. Cassidy spat. Fat sow ain't worth dying for, beast. Give her back. She's ours to toy with. Those words snapped something, not in Tobias, in Iris. She rose. Open the door, she whispered. Tobias's head whipped toward her. No. Tobias, she said, stronger this time. Open it. You don't. Yes, she said. I do? He hesitated, not out of doubt in himself, but out of fear for her. Then slowly he stepped to the door and unlatched the heavy bar. The moment it swung open, cold air rushed in, carrying the stink of whiskey and rage. 4 men stood outside, Cassidy in front, 2 miners behind him, and Turner at the back, pale and uneasy. Iris stepped forward. Tobias stiffened, ready to drag her back if needed. But Iris's chin lifted, and something fierce flickered behind her eyes. She faced Cassidy directly. "You came all this way for me?" Her voice was surprisingly steady. "Seems I live rent-free in that little mind of yours." Cassidy blinked, thrown off balance. You think you can talk to me like—" "I can," she said, "because you had your chance to break me. You failed." His face purpled. "You ran away." "I survived," she corrected. "And now you're here on his doorstep, begging for attention like a dog left out in the cold." A hoarse laugh escaped Turner, quickly stifled. Cassidy spun, furious. "Shut up!" Then he lunged, not toward Iris, toward Tobias. 2 feet of snow sprayed as he charged with a knife drawn. But Tobias had lived through ambushes fiercer than this. He moved with a predator's precision, grabbing Cassidy's wrist, twisting hard until bone cracked with an audible snap. Cassidy screamed, knife dropping into the snow. The other 2 men reached for their guns. Iris raised the pistol. "I wouldn't," she said. They froze. The barrel didn't waver. Her voice didn't shake. Tobias flung Cassidy into the snowbank like a discarded sack and turned to the other men. "Pick up your friend," he said, "then get off my mountain." They obeyed immediately, scrambling. Cassidy groaned, clutching his ruined wrist. "You think this is over?" he spat weakly. "We'll be back." "No," Iris said softly. "You won't." Tobias stepped behind her, his presence immense and steady. His hand hovered near her shoulder, not touching, but anchoring. "You'll leave redemption," Iris said. "Tonight. All of you. If you don't, I'll come down from this mountain myself. And next time, Tobias won't have to lift a hand. I'll handle you." Cassidy stared at her, genuine fear creeping into his eyes. The men retreated, dragging him into the trees. Silence returned to the valley. Iris exhaled, shaking. Tobias closed the door, bolted it, then turned to face her. "You stood," he said quietly. "You taught me," she whispered back. Their eyes held, and something shifted between them, no longer unspoken. Not anymore. The door thudded shut. The bolt slid into place with a weighty, final certainty. Outside, the snow swallowed the last echo of retreating footsteps. Inside, the cabin felt impossibly still. The fire cracked softly, throwing amber light across the wooden walls. Smoke curled gently upward, carrying the scent of pine sap and something warm, something settling deep into Iris's chest. She leaned back against the table, breath trembling, pistol still clutched in her hand. Tobias stepped forward slowly, carefully, as if approaching a skittish wild creature he didn't want to startle. "You can put that down now," he said quietly. Iris looked at the gun. Her fingers loosened. It landed on the table with a soft clack. Silence stretched between them, thick, charged, alive. Tobias's voice dropped to a low rumble. "You didn't have to face them." "Yes," she answered. "I did." He moved closer. "You could have stayed behind me." "I've hidden behind people my whole life," she said. "You made me realize I don't have to." His breath caught, not loud, but unmistakable. "I've never seen anything like what you did out there," he murmured. Iris looked up, her chest still rising too fast, cheeks flushed from fear and fury and something deeper. "I was terrified." "You didn't look it." "I was," she repeated softer, "but I wasn't alone." Tobias's jaw clenched as if holding back words too heavy for air. "When he went for you, when he said those things, I thought I'd lose my mind." Iris stepped toward him, not boldly, not timidly, just willingly. And when he went for you, I thought I'd fall apart. Their breaths mingled, warm in the cold cabin air. "Sit with me," Tobias said, voice rough. "By the fire." She nodded. They sank onto the rug before the hearth, side by side but not touching. Flames painted their faces in shifting gold. Wind whispered at the shutters. The world felt impossibly far away. For a while, neither spoke. Finally, Tobias turned his head slightly. "You know what today means?" Iris swallowed. "That I'm not running anymore?" "That." He paused. "And that you're not temporary here, not anymore." Her throat tightened. "Tobias, I said you could leave any time," he continued. "I meant it. But after today, after what you showed out there—" He shook his head, eyes filling with something unguarded. "Iris, I don't want you to leave, ever." The fire popped. A spark danced upward, bright and brief. "And I don't want to leave," she whispered. He drew a shaky breath, like a man who'd carried grief too long and didn't know what to do with hope. "You're safe here," he said softly. "As long as I live, you're safe here. If you'll have this place, if you'll have me." Her eyes welled, not with the old tears of humiliation, but with something warm, overwhelming, breathtakingly new. "I already have," Iris whispered, "long before tonight." A silence followed, not empty, but full. Full enough to build a life on. Outside, snow continued to fall softly against the window. Inside, firelight wrapped around them like a promise. Iris leaned her head lightly, just lightly, against Tobias's shoulder. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply breathed once, deep and trembling, and then let his head rest gently against hers. And in that quiet mountain cabin, with the world held at bay by wood and flame, closeness blossomed, not yet named, not fully claimed, but unmistakably alive. A beginning, not an ending. Stories like Iris and Tobias's remind us that sometimes the strongest hearts are forged in the quietest places, far from the noise of the world that once tried to break them. Out there in the Bitterroot Mountains, two wounded souls didn't just survive, they found something worth living for. If you're listening right now, wherever you are, from Montana to Manila, from Texas to Tokyo, tell us where this story found you. Your comments remind us that even across oceans and time zones, stories can bind strangers together. And if you still believe love can rise from hardship, stay close. The next tale is already on its way.